Hello.
Hi. Welcome to Wisdom for Menopause and Beyond. Partly is...
It's partly about menopause and what happens at menopause and things that we find helpful at menopause.
And the other thing is Beyond, which is really about insights about midlife.
Midlife and sort of what we pick up. So we thought we'd talk about midlife and why are we doing this? And I think we've reached, I'm going to say midlife and be a bit cheeky.
We are midlife and beyond.
We are midlife and beyond. But I definitely think there's changes and things that have really helped me that in the first part of life was one thing. And then we kind of get to midlife and I've completely changed. I wouldn't recognize myself.
It is interesting.
We picked up lots of different ways of thinking and different ways of being, which is kind of what we're here for, to sort of see whether you find it helpful, whether you have other things, but it's that really nice connection with midlife and beyond. So we were thinking, what is this?
What is midlife? And it's almost like saying, when is it? When is midlife? Because, if you're going on 10, then your midlife is 35 then, isn't it? Beyond.
But I guess what made me think about why we put menopause and midlife together, because people think of menopause as a disease over there that we can fix with something, or a broken bit. But actually, there's so many lovely changes that happen that we've gone on. And I think it's sort of a different way the brain works because of the hormones, because of the changes. There's an element of freedom, and that can often coincide with changes with work, with children, with parents and things like that. But it's also something about us changes. Something about us finding a freedom or a different way of thinking.
I mean, I quite like that, because it's almost like, I suppose I would say, what is midlife? I would kind of say it kind of might start at 40, but it doesn't, there's not a kind of, I would say midlife almost kind of goes on.
Yes.
I mean, so we're in our 60s, but it's like we're still in midlife, because it's almost like we're kind of still transitioning. So we've done the kind of physical transition in one way, but there's a whole lot of mental transition that goes on.
Massive. And I think all the building that I'm doing mentally and emotionally happens from that midlife point, not always from the beginning point. It's not like a curve like that goes up as we get better. It sort of goes like that, and then it sort of stops and goes like that again. It's sort of a real handover, which is why I thought it was important to see what I thought.
Because like you, I look back and I look at who I was in my 20s and who I was in my 30s, and I'm just kind of thinking, blimey, I made those decisions.
I did that,
did I?
Yeah.
And some of them are kind of quite, that's interesting. I'm a person that ran a marathon at one point, in my early 30s, my mid 30s, I'm thinking, crikey, I'm not sure why I thought that was important, but I'm quite happy of that achievement.
But I do think you sort of make changes on a different plane, or decisions on a different plane, it's probably better to say, that it's almost like you start from a different point, and it feels perhaps more independent. And I think it's why people get lost at midlife. They're going along, and I think that's why I know there's lots of things I've done here while we're doing this, is to try to help you make the most of your post midlife, or your midlife and beyond, whatever that is.
Because it's always like, are there too many choices? It's a bit like I always used to say when we lived in the States, when you kind of went in to get a cup of tea at Dunkin' Donuts, it's like first they would ask you whether it was hot or cold tea you wanted, and then they would ask you what kind of tea, in which they would include things like peppermint tea. I'm thinking, that's not the kind of tea I'm after. and then it would be, and what do you want to put? And then there was the size, obviously, as the cup. You have many sizes of cup. And then you have, and what do you want to put in it? From like skimmed milk all the way through to cream. I'm going, no. And the difference was when we went out here, I just remember there was one time me and Rob went into a cafe in Chester, and we ordered a pot of tea, and they brought us a pot of tea, and I went, oh, that's so restful.
Did you not feel like, ask me some different questions?
That's right.
Ask me some questions. I can do this.
But it was that kind of thing. So when you get to midlife, in a way, there isn't like there's no template which kind of says, because over the beginning, I kind of think we're probably still following that thing, you're at a certain point, then you go to school, then the idea is then you might go to university or not, and then you might kind of get together with somebody, and then you might have children or not, or whatever those kind of things are, and you have a career and it goes through there. But at midlife, it just gets a little bit
there can
different.
be hopefully less constraints as well.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're forced into a position when you're younger, so there may be less constraints. Sometimes there's more constraints, but there's also the fact that you still want to live within those. You don't want to exist in those. No. So I think you're right. I think that's an interesting idea, that there's almost no template, but the template we have is a really rubbish one. It's like retire, stay in.
You're waiting. You're going to midlife, then you're waiting to retire, and then it's all going to be fine.
And then it's almost like people make their world smaller, and they make it smaller because it feels a bit fearful being out there. But when you're younger, you face the fear, or when you're pushed to pay a mortgage, bring up your kids, whatever, you have to face the fear. And suddenly, when there's no constraints, people sort of don't face the fear and do it anyway. They kind of make their life smaller. I suppose it was like when I had that thought, a few years ago, and, I was working in academia more, and I had this thing of, should I do a PhD and all the rest of it? And I remember having that thought and thinking, oh, well, I've only got a few years until retirement. I could probably get away with not doing one. And I kind of went, what are you thinking? Yeah. Why am I writing myself off? But also, do you want to do this for a career?
Yeah.
Or do you want to do this?
Yeah.
And when people go, well, I can get away with not doing it, I think this is where the world gets smaller. And then if you make the world a foot smaller, you still stay a foot from that boundary. So then you make it a foot smaller again. Then you stay a foot from that. So people's lives get very small.
And the advantage of that was, so I could have that, and I kind of started it from kind of thought of maybe it's important for my career, but actually as I got into it, the more I realized actually this is about me. It's about me having faith in myself that I can still do this, and it's okay, and I can do it and not do it. And it was interesting dealing with other people who were doing their PhD, who were much, much younger, who were doing it for a career and all the rest of it, and certain things that they felt they had to do, or they had to do a particular kind of research, they got funding, they hadn't, all the rest of it. I didn't have any of those restrictions, so I could just do it. And when I got to the point where I kind of thought, okay, I think I've done this now. And, when my supervisor said, yeah, you've got another year of really hard work. And I went, nah, I don't think so. Nah, I'm just trading it in for an MPhil. And I'm happy about that. I was okay about that,
It would still be, in a strange way, making your life smaller. Because instead of doing all of that stuff over there, you were going to do this bit that you'd kind of lost the impetus on. So
interesting.
I think it's very good to rewrite the rule book, and just say, this is time to make my world bigger and a little more impetuous, a bit more have a go at something. Because the rule book we have, it's only recently people have lived long enough after midlife.
Yes, that's right. If you were a woman in Roman times, average age of death was 32. So we had a lot of things we didn't have to deal with. We certainly didn't have to deal with menopause, that's for sure.
Even 100 years ago, people didn't necessarily, well, my family did, but family.
It's like you worked in a factory.
Well, most people, the age of retirement was 60, 65, because you were considered to have 2 or 3 more years left.
No, originally, that was when they kind of said about the pension. The pension age originally was 70. But only 1 in 4 got to 70. So they thought that was quite a good way of doing it. You can have a retirement pension, but actually not many people were going to get it. And the average age and the average number of years you had your pension was 9.
Wow.
So you were done by 79. And that was like about 1908. I looked it up because I was thinking about that whole thing about being a pensioner. What the hell did it mean? But it was quite interesting that so that you're right.
You're right. So we definitely have that. So I think midlife is rip up the rule book. This generation is probably one of the first to really have this time. So that's why we thought it's quite important to talk about midlife. Just to sort of get that out there, because we're just thinking things that have helped us
Yeah.
rewrite that rule book and make freedoms and make new things around the place.
Yeah, so great. Rip up the rule book. How exciting.